Coming up today on LinkedIn News Live, Jeff Bezos created one of the greatest retail empires in history, making billions in the process and forever changing modern American life. We dig into how he did it with the journalist who's been covering Amazon for over a decade. That and your comments next. Welcome, I'm George Anders, and this is LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins with you. Today, we'll be talking about Jeff Bezos and Amazon's unprecedented growth. From Whole Foods to Alexa to the Washington Post, there isn't a facet of American culture that Jeff Bezos hasn't touched. And the bigger that Amazon gets, the more controversial the company becomes. Joining us now is Brad Stone, author of Amazon Unbound, Jeff Bezos, and the Invention of a Global Empire. Brad, welcome.
Hi, George. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. So this is your second book on Amazon. You did the Everything Store in 2013. You went off, you had a life, you did other things, and now you're back. What's brought you back to Amazon, and what's changed since the last time you wrote about the company?
Right. Apparently, I'm a glutton for punishment, George. I started looking at Amazon in late 2017 and realized that it was a different company and there was a whole new story. And it was a great story. In some respects, maybe an even better story than the origin of Amazon, the first 15 years that I covered in the Everything Store. The span of this book, Amazon Unbound, is the story of a big company that gets huge, right? It goes from $100 billion in market cap to 1.6 trillion. I mean, that just doesn't happen in business. It's unique. The Kindle company became the Alexa company. The marketplace became global. Amazon went from relying on postal services and UPS to creating its own transportation company almost overnight and driving our neighborhoods and our highways. And then, of course, parallel to all that, Jeff Bezos goes from the geeky technologist who was bragging about the technical specifications of the Fire phone to this action hero of the business world, not just a physical transformation, though, but on the world stage, the owner of the Washington Post, battling with the Trump administration, a personal scandal that ends up on the pages of the National Enquirer. And it was just a remarkable tale, and it drew me back. And I thought, you know what? If the Everything Store was Star Wars, it was time for The Empire Strikes Back.
So when you say the action hero, there's a little bit of action villain as well. I mean, Jeff Bezos is working this from all angles.
I was thinking in terms of Vin Diesel, but you're right. He can play the protagonist and the antagonist.
There you go. So we've got all kinds of wonderful people joining us from the stream. We've got people coming in from Jamaica, people from all kinds of countries. It's going to be a very international program. I want to start with something in the headlines. So there's talk that Amazon wants to buy MGM for $9 billion. Does that deal make sense to you? And where might we go if that was actually going to happen?
Sure. I mean, MGM has been a sort of jump ball independent studio for many years. The price was much higher. It's come down. It's very Amazon-like to wait until these things happen. But obviously, Bezos has been spearheading personally this investment in video. He's made it a key component of Prime. Prime started as a shipping program, and now we have fulfillment centers all over the country, all over the world, outside major cities. 2-day shipping is kind of going to be guaranteed anyway, so content has become key to the Prime Kingdom. But of course, MGM's a studio with all these older assets like the James Bond movies, old Survivor episodes. Well, Amazon has this asset called IMDb TV. George, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's actually, it seems almost conventional. It's free ad-supported TV programming. And this is a whole other major category of the video streaming wars. And companies like Roku are competing, but Amazon's a leader with IMDb TV. And I see that vast trove of MGM content being added, not just to Prime Video, but IMDb TV, and kind of supercharging Amazon's advertising, very fast-growing advertising business.
Fascinating. Yeah, how all the pieces fit together. So we at LinkedIn write a lot about Amazon too. They were #1 on our top companies list this past spring. And it's a company that some people love to work at and some people are at the opposite of love. Share with me your thoughts of what advice you'd give to someone who's thinking of working at Amazon.
Well, read my books. Maybe that's a little self-serving, but you have to understand it. And I think the culture, and I think the reason why it ends up at the top of those lists is that it does really, Amazon sort of selects the people who fit in this machinery that Jeff Bezos has created. And there are the famous leadership principles and the, the many reports over many years that the culture can be difficult, that there are high standards. The company churns through people almost deliberately to keep itself lean and to keep employees hungry. And that just doesn't work for everyone. And perhaps it works for a selection of folks who go there and have meaningful, productive periods in their careers, sometimes move on, and then other people come in and take one look at it and flee. And the turnover rate at Amazon is high. And so I think it's a matter of understanding what you're getting into, reading up about the corporate culture, the leadership principles, and understanding that this is going to be a deliberately challenging period in your career.
Nicely framed. So I'd like to welcome all of the people who are coming in to listen. We've got Tanya from Florida, Jefferson from Portugal, Furman from Indonesia. And let's draw our audience into this conversation. And the question I'd put to everyone listening is, would you want to work for Amazon? And your choices are yes, no, it depends. And share a little bit of your reasoning. And then as I host, I'll welcome some of those questions into the mix, and we'll get Brad's thoughts on the kinds of things that you've surfaced. So join the poll. Would you want to work at Amazon? Brad, talk a little more about the Amazon tempo. Most big companies slow down. I mean, it takes, Apple 5 years to develop things. They're still working on the self-driving car. Amazon, every time you blink, they've got a new product. How do they keep moving so fast?
Right. And in fact, that was one of the things that drew me back to write this book. This is this understanding that even at the scale and size that Amazon had become, it was actually growing. It had started to grow faster, even in the older businesses like the marketplace business. In terms of, why we tend to see press releases from them almost every single day of the week, it's very decentralized. The leadership team, the S team exerts some measure of control, pushing goals down into the organization. Bezos can kind of show up to audit different groups, but they kind of hover above and let the individual leaders move fast. They've got this idea of a single-threaded leader who's kind of a CEO of his own group or team. And then those teams push up metrics up through the organization back to the S team. Well, what that allows them to do, is to release new products with the cadence of a startup, to move independently, to not have to coordinate with other teams. Sometimes they're operating in competition with their fellow teams. I talked about IMDb TV, to some degree competing with Prime Video, and they don't mind that. They embrace that kind of internal competition because they want to experiment with a lot of things and see what works. And so that decentralized model basically empowers employees and allows them to move very quickly. And then, of course, the downside is to make some very egregious and public mistakes, as they've done as well over the years.
Nicely explained. And of course, there's the famous 2 pizza rule, where teams should not be any bigger than it takes to feed with 2 pizzas. So that decentralized, everyone's going in a different direction as fast as they can. It's just always been a hallmark. So you teased us a little at the beginning with your take on Jeff Bezos, and I want to drill down a little farther. You write in the book, he's a very different person from who he was 20 years ago. Tell me more.
Well, I report in the book that he is building this super yacht, right? And it's a small little detail of maybe expected extravagance of wealth these days. And it's this three-mast sailboat and an accompanying support yacht for the helicopters, because, of course, George, you need the support yacht. But that, to me, epitomized the dramatic change. 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, I could not have imagined Bezos indulging in this kind of thing. He was focused on Amazon. He was careful about how he used his time. He wasn't on the world stage in the way that he is now. And it's been this gradual transformation. The ownership of the Washington Post and battling with Trump, obviously enjoying Amazon's foray into Hollywood and kind of closely managing the selection of new TV shows and movies, his relationship with Lauren Sanchez, who, herself is a member of the Hollywood community. All of these things, I think, have opened up his worldview. He's focused on Amazon, but increasingly more than that. The Post, Blue Origin, his space company, this really entertaining rivalry with Elon Musk, and then, of course, meeting world leaders, going to the events and parties, pre-COVID and hopefully soon post-COVID, and then things like the yacht and the helicopter hobby, and spending more time at Blue Origin. So I would say, his worldview has opened, his focus has broadened, and he started to enjoy, I think, being a member of elite society in a way that I didn't really recognize was so early on.
No, that's fascinating. You give a lot of examples in the book of Bezos in meetings, and sometimes he's got a really good insight, and a lot of times he doesn't. I mean, he's a little behind the times, or he's marching people in a direction that's not going to work. So I got to ask the bigger question: is Amazon succeeding because of Bezos, or is it succeeding in spite of him?
Yeah, I mean, certainly because of Bezos, and perhaps you could even say because sometimes they do silly things that fail. I mean, they would say the experimentation is central to their success. You might not get Alexa if you didn't have the Fire Phone, or at least the mentality that was behind the Fire Phone, trying outlandish but unique things. But I think you make a good point, which is that as Bezos has gotten more wealthier and started to breathe more rarefied air, his feet have left the ground a little bit. And I have some funny stories in the book. There's one where he initiated the creation of a single cow burger, a burger made from the meat of just one cow, because he had read an article about how hamburgers could come from the meat of 100 cows. Very unappetizing, but he thought, consumers would want this premium hamburger. He pushed it through the organization. He taste tested it. He rejected the first version. And I have not gotten the sense, and maybe I'm wrong here, I don't think I am though, that the single cow burger has been a game changer for Amazon Fresh. So yes, his taste might be diverging a little bit from those of the common man, but nevertheless, that spirit of experimentation and the willingness to fail and the willingness even to be embarrassed, I think might be, might be part of Amazon's strength in some weird way.
I want to know as little as possible about how ground beef got to be ground beef. I mean, there's a butcher shop down the way from us that has Wagyu beef, and the cows have names. And no, it just ruins the whole thing for me. I mean, the one cow beef, burger, too much detail, too much information.
I agree with you on that.
So let me remind our listeners, we're conducting a poll on the question, would you want to work at Amazon? And weigh in, type in the stream your thoughts of what would be exciting or what would not be exciting about being at Amazon. So we get a split already. Christine says no. She says the constant complaints by employees make it sound as if they have a lot of issues. But on the other side, Francis says yes. The knowledge that can be learned from working at Amazon can be valuable for young entrepreneurs. Brad, it looks like, much as you framed it, our audience is splitting it down the middle. Add your thoughts.
I'm reminded of the recent union situation in Bessemer, Alabama, where there was so much media attention to that. And even the president of the United States kind of weighed in favor of the organizing effort. And then employees voted 2-1 against it. And now, of course, that's subject to a hearing and whether Amazon acted inappropriately. And certainly Amazon kind of holds all the cards in those kinds of elections. But fundamentally, workers voted against the organizing effort. And look, I mean, I think it speaks to the sort of division here. We can tell a lot of stories about Amazon culture, and certainly I do in the book, the transactional nature of work, the reason why Bezos wants to push employees through the fulfillment centers and not have them hang around and get disgruntled. But in this labor environment, in this economy, Amazon is a tech company, that's offering a lot to workers. And it's a valued employer, and look, a lot of people want to spend time there. So it's not an easy story to tell. I think it's quite complicated.
Yeah. So Amazon's about to get a new CEO. Andy Jassy is going to take over. He's the head of Amazon Web Services, the cloud computing business. Give me your take on Andy Jassy. Right now, he's a man of mystery. What can you tell us about him?
Well, it's funny. In the book, I recount the HQ2 process, and Philadelphia was one of the finalists. And in a meeting, Jassy opined that Amazon employees wouldn't want to live there, and that he personally disliked Philadelphia because he's a Giants fan, and he didn't like the Eagles. And that story, George, ended up on the front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and it's probably the one negative piece of PR that Jassy has had to circumnavigate over the course of his 20-year career at Amazon. So, it's a funny little anecdote. It's not, sort of unclear whether it was joking in that meeting, by the way. But of course, Amazon did not pick Philadelphia. But by and large, this guy is responsible, for 15 years of incredible growth at AWS, the cloud business, Amazon's most profitable piece of the company. A remarkable story. If it was an independent company, $50 billion a year in sales at an annual run rate is extraordinary. So he spent time as Jeff Bezos' chief of staff. He learned from Bezos. And I think as Bezos' replacement, he'll present a sort of humbler figurehead and perhaps target of regulators than Bezos did himself.
So you mentioned the whole second headquarters project, and in the book you give a lot of detail of how that selection process happened. I mean, it was all done behind a curtain for us. Everything was quiet until you get the two winners. What are the cities that almost got there? Talk a little bit about the near misses.
Yeah, I mean, well, just to give you a little bit of background, Amazon, presents this RFP to cities, and they list the cost of construction and the cost of living and the size of the incentive packages as being major variables. And then 238 regions around the country apply. They winnow it down to 20. The HQ2 selection committee visits the 20 and selects Philadelphia, which I mentioned, Raleigh, and Chicago as being the finalists. And then Bezos and the S team come in and kind of throw it out. And one reason was the political situation in Seattle had deteriorated, and they were looking for bigger markets with more talent. And then there was probably a personal, impulse there. I mentioned Jassy in Philadelphia, and Bezos has homes in New York and Washington, D.C. There were personal preferences there. He was learning to fly helicopters at the time, and not coincidentally, Amazon asked for a helipad at the offices in Northern Virginia and Long Island City, Queens. And that, of course, creates a huge political backlash in the city of New York. So, it was a scientific process driven by data. And then in the end, it kind of devolved into something else.
Fascinating. As you give us the context, we've got a really interesting question from Martin in the stream. He asks, since Jeff Bezos has already reached success, what's his next challenge?
I mean, it's clearly, I think, to redeem Blue Origin, his 2-decade-old space company, and to catch up with the tremendous momentum and accomplishments of SpaceX, which is now, it really seems like launching rockets every week, bringing astronauts to the space station, launching a SpaceX satellite network called Starlink, winning contracts to go to the moon, and advancing in its mission to go to Mars. And Bezos made some bad choices early on with Blue Origin. He was constraining the headcount. He was limiting his investment. He thought they could go step by step. And only recently has he realized that, the government is paying Elon to pursue his space dreams, and Bezos is funding Blue Origin all by himself. And of course, he wants to catch up. And look, I don't know if he's going to go there, any more than he already does, once a week at most. But I do think it needs his attention. And I think I would imagine that there's a fair amount, not of jealousy, but maybe of sort of admiration that Elon has been able to do as much as he has. And Blue Origin has kind of failed so far to meet its promises on launch dates.
So there's a question that fascinates me. I mean, if you look at epic billionaires of prior generations, Howard Hughes comes to mind, briefly the richest person in the world. And everything got very wobbly for him at the end. And with both Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, they're skating close to the edge. What's your sense of what their stabilizers are, or if there are no stabilizers?
Yeah, I don't predict Howard Hughes like eccentricity for Bezos. I mean, Musk, sometimes with the tweets and the undisciplined energy that emanates from him, you might wonder, that's not my area of expertise. But Bezos feels like he has more to accomplish. He calls himself an inventor. He mentioned that in that last shareholder letter he wrote to investors. And he says he's going to stick around Amazon to continue to create and sponsor new projects. Blue Origin, his work isn't done there. And then, of course, he's got this tremendous wealth, $200 billion. And one of the ways in which we're really measuring, the success and the legacy of our billionaire businessmen these days is by what they give back. And Bezos got a really late start on that and really only turned to philanthropy because of the public pressure. And now he has announced an early education effort, a climate effort, the Bezos Earth Fund, and he's got to follow through on it, right? So he's got a lot of promises to keep. And I really don't anticipate, despite the luxury yacht and sailing the high seas, that he'll be slowing down all that much.
So we've got time for just a couple more questions. I want to, get a light one in the mix. I've always wondered what the voice of Alexa might be, and is this synthesized or what? You got to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
You turned on your investigative reporter afterburners. What can you tell us about the voice of Alexa?
When I started this project, George, you'll appreciate this. I had a couple of mysteries that I wanted to go and solve, and that was one of them. Because if you remember, we knew who the voice of Siri was. That had come out years before. And so, I set it as a goal. I kind of networked through the companies that Amazon had acquired, and ultimately the studio where they produced the Alexa voice. And I found this Boulder based voice actress and singer named Nina Raleigh. And you can go to her website and play some of the clips she has there of some of the other voiceover work she's done. And it's unmistakable. And I called her up and, had a very brief conversation before she had to basically go because she's got a non-disclosure agreement. But it was really clear that that is the voice that is coming out of over 100 million internet connected speakers these days.
So you have actually talked to the real Alexa. That's a cool thing.
Yes. And she basically said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you with that." I was like, oh yeah, that definitely is her.
That was your moment. And then the last question, anytime a book like this comes out, there's always the question of how does the company react, and both what the official position is and then the little whispers that you get. What's Amazon been telling you, or the Amazon community?
Well, publicly, nothing. And to me, that sort of tells me they've learned their lesson. Because, George, if you remember, after the Everything Store came out, they responded with a litany of one-star reviews, including from Bezos's wife at the time, Mackenzie. And they didn't appreciate that book or some of the reporting in it. And they let me know, and they let the world know, and it delivered a whole bunch of additional attention. So I am sure there are parts of this book that they find excruciating, because it is in parts a critical book. And yet maybe they're too smart. At least now they've learned from their past mistakes and they haven't really been engaging. But look, I'm super proud of it. I think it tells the story, warts and all. It is a story of business accomplishment, but also what some of the consequences are. So, hopefully they're finding it to be a resource maybe for their employees to understand how the company got where it is today.
Fantastic. It's been great having you on the show. I wish we had more time to chat, but the book is Amazon Unbound. The author is Brad Stone. Thanks a bunch for coming in to talk with us.
Thank you, George. Great to talk to you.
That was Brad Stone, journalist and author of Amazon Unbound. We'll do this again tomorrow. This time, Andrew Seaman will be your host, and he will chat with an expert about how to stand out in the hiring process. I'm George Anders. Thanks for watching LinkedIn News Live.